Thank you very much for joining us. Great to have you.
It's a pleasure.
So, as is said, just a quick background on yourself, where you come from, how you got involved in the company, and then just as you were saying a minute ago, a bit of history in the company, very, very interesting.
Well, I'm originally Canadian by background, so I grew up in North America, so entrepreneurial, go-for-it kind of mentality is in the blood. And I came over to the UK originally to study, to do a PhD in physics as a Rhodes Scholar. And like many things, I met the woman of my dreams and settled down. But then I got into technology from an investor's and from a commercial perspective. So really, I was never really that good at inventing stuff myself, but I understood that technology could turn into money. And that's really what got me going into corporate venturing and investing. And then eventually I saw a venture that I really wanted to bet my own personal career on, and in a sense go native, and that's what became Ceres Power. I joined about a year after the company was founded out of the labs of Imperial College.
Okay. And about the company itself, obviously it came through Imperial in the labs there, but what happened since it left that lab?
Well, the 1990s were kind of the science years, where the basic, does it work type questions were answered. And after those 10 years of material science research in the 1990s, the company was founded in 2001. And since those 9 years that we've been going, the company has moved on from that kind of proof of concept early stage to actually making it real. So moving from that beaker to the first prototypes to the first pilot lines to now our first factory as of 9 months ago has been an incredible journey. And really it's been with a commercial focus in mind. We didn't want to be designing something irrelevant, so we wanted to make absolutely sure we got our customers and our channels to market on board as soon as possible. And that's really what we did with British Gas in this case, because they recognized that we could turn their business on its head with our technology. And that kind of fear and greed motivator is really what gets a lot of people out of bed.
And you've had quite a lot of finance along the way as well, haven't you?
That's right. We've raised a couple of rounds of venture capital, in a sense, during the private days. So we raised £4 million to get the company started, and then another £6 million from some private investors. And then towards the end of 2004, we took the company public on the AIM market of the London Stock Exchange, raising £15 million. And then at that point in 2007 and 8, where the first prototypes were looking like, yes, they're going to do the real deal. We want to make absolutely sure before we built major factories and global supply chains and spent the real money, the tens of millions, we got really concrete customer traction on board. So that's when British Gas actually became one of our biggest shareholders, and they invested £20 million to buy a 10% stake of the business. And really since then, we've been focusing on taking that residential combined heat and power market, which is our flagship product, to market in volume. And really on the back of that first order, now we've got 3 customers, we've now invested in the manufacturing capacity and the supply chain to really get that product to market in volume.
Could you tell us a bit, just technically, how this actually works then?
Yeah, it is a bit of magic, but actually it works in your everyday life. So you take a device, an electrochemical device similar to a battery, it's called a fuel cell, and in our case it's a sheet of stainless steel coated in ceramic layers. And those ceramic layers are really the magic bit of this, that when you flow air over one side and fuel over the other, electricity and heat pour out as if by magic. So really what we do is we embed a number of these devices layered up into a stack about half the size of a car battery into something that looks like a residential boiler, a central heating system, and that becomes not just the heater for your house but also the power station for your house. So really it's installed, serviced and maintained in exactly the same way as an ordinary gas boiler is, but it actually produces your home's electricity as well as heat. So you no longer need to buy power from the grid. And really what that means is you can dramatically reduce your electricity bills by making it yourself. So it's the same way computers used to be big and clunky mainframes, and now you've got personal computers on every desk in the world. We think the same thing is happening with power. So power stations used to be big in the middle of nowhere, and now there'll be one in every house in the world. And really that's the vision of Ceres Power, is to put that power station in everybody's house in the world.
Obviously a similar vision to Steve Jobs, decades ago, but how long do you think it will take before you can be in every house?
Well, we've done the heavy lifting to prove that the technology works and that we can actually make these things in sensible volumes. So really, 2010, where we are now, this is the year of trialing these units in households across the country. And next year, 2011, is when they'll go on sale in a much more mainstream way. And then we've through each of our 3 major contracts so far, we've secured 4 or 5 years of forward order volumes, which right now we've got hundreds of millions of pounds of forward order visibility already. So our order book is nice and full, and we're going for it.
So what sort of price would it cost the average consumer to get this into their house?
Well, initially, the price point we're looking at is where the payback period can be as short as 5 years, and actually, with economies of scale, you could get down to maybe 2 or 3 years. So, obviously, like a lot of green technologies, it's really critical to get the cost down from an early starting point, which is a lot more expensive than it'll be in the future, and that's where things like government incentives and so forth are really helpful to get you over those early years of actually high prices per unit before you get the economies of scale kick in. But hopefully, without too much time elapsing, this can be economic in its own right, without subsidy. Although the kickstart at the beginning from government incentives is critical.
So what about the training behind this then? Because obviously people are used to putting central heating and plugging it to the mains electricity. Is special training needed in installers for this?
There's awareness, yes, but no special training, no. In other words, it's designed to be installed, serviced, and maintained in the same way that your central heating is today. So really, it's just we designed it right from the blueprint, right from the drawings, over the last few years to make it easy to install and service and maintain. If it was difficult, it just won't happen. So really, that's what we tried to do to make it as market relevant as possible, to make sure our engineers are working for hitting a particular bullseye, which will make it easy to install in millions of homes, as opposed to making it awkward or a hassle for consumers. People only take it up if it's easy to do, and really that's what we made sure the technology was easy to install in millions of homes.
Obviously there's a lot of talk just now about these main power hubs, whether it be offshore wind farms or tidal farms or nuclear power stations, but you're talking about throwing this completely on its head. How are you finding dealing with the government who's got these policies for this sort of thing? And surely you've got a lot of enemies with the kind of wind farms and things as well.
I think it's more an and as opposed to an or. I think there's a recognition now that the last 100 years of power generation, which is almost exclusively about centralized power stations, those days are over. But it's not that every single power station is going to be put out of business tomorrow. That's a fantasy which is not real. So there'll be a mix, and I think that's the recognition now that's seen in government policy, in the eyes of utility companies themselves, and eventually consumers will recognize this as well. People get more used to generating their own power locally in their own homes or in their own businesses, whereas right now the basic model is you make the electricity in the middle of nowhere, you shove it down very expensive wires, and you use it in your house. People will get more and more used to generating in their own homes. Governments already get it, utility companies are getting it, and consumers will get it. And I think this is really where we are, is at that tipping point where there's going to be a shift from centralized to decentralized power generation. That's very exciting. And it's the same shift that's happened in computing from mainframes to PCs. It's the same shift that happened in telephony from fixed line networks to mobile telephony. All the biggest industries in the world have shifted from centralized models to decentralized models. We're doing the same in energy.
So obviously that's going to take quite a while to get there, decades possibly. But if we're looking, say, 5 years in line, 2015, where do you see this energy consumption in the UK being?
By then, you could easily start seeing it becoming a mass market product, where it becomes a more standard fit in many homes. So you'll just think, do I want a normal central heating system? Do I want a combined heat and power system? Do I want just a pure power generator? You'll have choices as a consumer, whereas right now, it is really the brave new world. So I think by that point, it's going to be becoming mainstream, and by the time we get to 2020, it'll hopefully have become mainstream. So we'll look back probably, if we're in 2020, look back and thinking, why do we do it in that old way? I think by the time we get to 2020, it'll become the standard energy supply of choice in most people's homes.
So looking forward with your customers, are you going to be focusing on countries like in UK, US, or the rest of Europe who've got this choice when they're doing a new build or a retrofit between your system and another one? Or are you going to be focusing on in developing countries as well that might not have mains power, so this could be their only option?
Both those markets are really exciting for completely different reasons. It's easier to get going in those parts of the world that already have a developed fuel infrastructure. Mains natural gas is the classic one that exists in the UK, large parts of Europe, North America, and Asia. But then that second wave is those countries which haven't yet invested the trillions in these centralized energy networks. And for them, it's potentially even more exciting because you can skip a generation into supplying power where you need it without having to build the centralized power stations or the big electricity networks, as long as you can deliver fuel to a household or a business and they have their own power and heat generator, then they can get grid quality electricity without having the grid in place at all. So the same kind of skipping of a generation you've seen in some parts of the developing world for telephony, straight to mobile networks with mass, that same skipping of a generation will happen in energy. But in those parts of the world that already have the grid networks, we'll just make it massively more efficient and less carbon intensive. For those parts of the world that don't have the so centralized networks, we'll skip a generation.
So going to entrepreneurs who are looking to get into this sector, do you think to be truly successful and get the major investment, they have to be doing, like, wanting to change the whole world's perception of energy like Ceres Power is doing, or do you think they can do it on a much smaller scale as well?
No, I think you both need to be grounded in reality as well as have an exciting vision. Don't get me wrong, I'm the most passionate guy about our company's future, but I'm also a deep realist. We have to do our homework in a really systematic way, and you can't you can't get too carried away with your own vision. You have to be grounded in reality. So I think the really key, the successful entrepreneurs, they'll take care of the homework along the way, as well as have the grand vision of changing the world, but really do their knitting along the way. Without that homework, you will fail.
So do you see Ceres Power being a major world player, or do you see it being part of other major corporations, each having a stake? How do you see it moving forward?
It's possible we'll evolve in 2 or 3 different ways. I would love Ceres Power to become one of the world's leading super major clean tech companies. The same way you've got 3 or 4 massive oil companies, or like Shell and BP, or 3 or 4 massive power engineering companies like GE or Siemens or Mitsubishi. I think in this clean tech space, there's room for 2 or 3 really big global multi-billion-pound companies to emerge, and I think Ceres Power is going to be one of them. Is it possible that along the way some other more major company might buy our company? That's possible. So there are a couple of different evolutionary scenarios. We could grow to become independent and a multi-billion-pound global business, or we might become part of a larger enterprise. Both those are possible.
You mentioned like Shell and BP earlier, who are obviously putting a lot of investment and effort into renewable energies. But how do you think they're doing in competing against companies like Ceres, who've come from nothing and are making such a big impact? How are they going to compete in the future?
I'm not sure if they'll compete. They may cooperate instead of competing. They may recognize that successful, innovative companies like Ceres Power may provide the solutions that they haven't come up with. So they may form more partnerships rather than compete head-on. And that's really what we've seen with our first key partners, like the utility companies. British Gas and others might have seen Ceres Power as a threat, but actually they've embraced it as an opportunity. So instead of trying to stop it from happening, they've recognized that this world may go decentralized in terms of its power production. And if they embrace it, if they become a channel to market, even better, then they can stand to win instead of standing to lose. So I think you'll see probably more cooperation, partnerships, as opposed to fight to the death competition between those incumbent energy companies and the new energy innovators like us. I think you'll see a lot more partnerships.
So talking about working together to make a successful company, going back to when you were chasing this initial investment, what did you look for in your investors? Was it just money, or was it expertise, or what was it?
It was a bit of everything. Certainly money is critical. Without cash, you can't live. But also some investors brought more than money. They either brought the green credentials. The Carbon Trust was one of our early venture capital backers, so having them on board as one of our shareholders let everybody know this company has great green credentials. So they provided some validation, which was critical for us. Others brought networks of people, so non-executive directors or other bits of talent that we could kind of phone up and help us out. Later on, some of our other shareholders had big connections either in government or in industry. So some of our board level contacts with big corporations, ultimately some of our customers, or even government officials came through some of our shareholders. So the investors you get along the way bring different things. Cash is common to all of them, but then sometimes they bring validation or credentials in your particular sector, or they bring the Rolodex and contacts that can open doors for you. It just depends. And we've systematically got shareholders that provide those different bits of value beyond just money.
You need to have a bit of everything then to make the truly successful firm.
Yep.
That's great. Thank you very much for your time.